Wonder Woman, historically, is the character whose comic is most likely to be a melting pot of drama, violence, and some legitimately kinky antics. The creator of the character ostentatiously used her to explore his own sordid fantasies, while making a bit of cash on the side for his BDSM daydream, which should explain why Wonder Woman initially had the unsubtle name of Suprema. And the comics that follow in the footsteps of these salacious beginnings take great inspiration from this, leaving Diana Prince with the kind of delightfully strange comic collection that would make even Batman blush. As much as it's all undeniably weird, it's also an integral part of the hero, which means that Wonder Woman can have moments that would seem completely out of character for literally any other superhero, including parody superheroes, and somehow make it work perfectly for the warrior princess. Between wearing dog collars, dressing like an animal, and skydiving sexcapades, the spirit of the Golden Age Wonder Woman comics is well and truly alive, and also well and truly designed for the best kind of comic degenerates. And speaking of comic degenerates, I'm Zoe from What Culture, and I'll be bringing you the 10 biggest WTF Wonder Woman moments. Number 10. Wonder Woman's kangaroo pet. When you hear the phrase, Wonder Woman owns kangaroos, it's natural to think that this was likely just part of the golden age of comics, as most of the wilder Wonder Woman stories take place in this time, and it was also an era rife with weird and wild animal assistance. But much like how the Bat Cow was brought to us in 2012, the use of the Amazon's weaponized kangaroos continued into the modern age of comics, much to our collective delight. As such, Wonder Woman's pet Jumper still exists, and is a valuable, if underused, member of the hero's team. It's silly, almost purposefully so, but seeing the Amazonians have jousting tourneys on the backs of kangaroos is something that will genuinely make your life better, regardless of who you are. Number 9. Zombie George Washington brainwashes people. Despite being a long-term rival of Wonder Woman, Dr. Psycho is a character who very easily flies under the radar, as he's now arguably best known from the Harley Quinn cartoon more than anything else. Which is a real shame, because a lot of his time in comics is the kind of pure wildness that makes you feel as though your veins are suddenly filled with pixie sticks. Take, for example, his initial appearance in Wonder Woman 5, where the good doctor manages to use his mind powers to convince everyone but Wonder Woman that he's George Washington, come back from the dead, in order to save America, which is so blatantly ridiculous that everyone naturally believes him. He uses this ability to convince everyone that women are evil and are going to blow up a munitions plant, all because a woman he once liked conspired with her boyfriend to get him sent to jail. That'll teach her, we guess. Number 8. Wonder Woman becomes an immortal president. The impressive thing about Wonder Woman 7 is that it takes a storyline wherein Diana Prince takes a vitamin that lets her live until the year 3000 and makes it perhaps the smallest plot point in the entire issue. The focus is instead placed on Diana's struggles to become president, 1,000 years into the future, because apparently Wonder Woman realizes her secret dream is to become the leader of the US the minute she becomes Loki immortal. Crucially, her secret identity is still hidden at this time, meaning that she wants to take on a job where she's under the most scrutiny she could possibly be, while still concealing an incredibly important fact from the people who are trusting her to lead them. However, it is worth mentioning that this is the same issue of Wonder Woman that has children go through a ritual where they're trapped in vegetables and must use their strength to break through them, or presumably otherwise die. So expecting normality here is probably a mistake on our part. Number 7. Wonder Woman fights a racially insensitive Eggman. Sometimes, in the dark of the night, when the day is done and you try to put the events of the day behind you, certain memories will flip back into your head. Usually of embarrassing things you've done in the day, or whatever else your brain thinks it can use to force you to stare at your ceiling in quiet suffering. Should you ever want to replace these thoughts with something more uniquely painful, you need only look to Egg Foo, an atrocious, racist, caricature Eggman who Wonder Woman fought from 1965 to the present day. Mercifully, the modern version is without the insulting accent and appearance of his former self, which makes him substantially more palatable. Even without all of this, though, the character was still entirely weird, as it placed Wonder Woman, a woman who's known for being able to punch very well, against an egg, a food item known for being very easy to shatter. As such, it's perhaps not the most even setup we've seen between a hero and a villain in comic history. Number 6. Superman and Wonder Woman's skydive sex. The sex scene between Superman and Wonder Woman in The Dark Knight Strikes Again is basically infamous among comic fans, as being the exact point at which you have to start believing that Frank Miller became a parody writer. It's hilarious, sure, but it's also written in a tone that makes it distinctly clear that it isn't intended to be a big joke, but rather a very serious comic. But if you can keep a straight face through the pair having sex while falling so intensely that they cause a volcano to erupt and a hurricane to ensue, then you must be legally banned from laughing, because it's so over the top your brain almost can't process it if you don't laugh. The whole scene reads like fanfiction written by a person who is embarrassed that they made it in the first place, as it straddles the line between being someone's charged erotic superhero fantasy and being a sex scene penned by someone who has actually forgotten what sex is. As a serious comic moment, it's the worst thing ever, but in terms of comedy, it's absolutely off the charts good. Number 5. Wonder Woman becomes a ritual cannibal. For the most part, it's easy to ignore the fact that early Wonder Woman comics contain a very strong BDSM tone, as creator William Marston's personal interest in such matters more often than not found its way into Wonder Woman's comics. However, for a good few pages in Wonder Woman 3, the ability to pretend that the whole thing isn't a pervert's buffet selection is made impossible, as we watch a unique Amazon ritual performed in incredible detail. Said ritual involves Amazons dressing like deer to be hunted by the remaining Amazons, but it doesn't stop there, because that would only be mildly weird. As, after the deer women are caught, they are then strung up and skinned, so their deer costume is removed, before being tied up and placed on a dinner table for the hunters to pretend to eat them. There's a very strong tone about the whole thing, and it's made infinitely worse by one panel wherein one former deer asks if she can be fed herself, in the most messed up sentence in human history. Number 4. Wonder Woman works at Taco Bell. Perhaps one of the most unusual storylines in the entire sordid history of Diana Prince begins in issue 72 of the second volume of Wonder Woman, where our hero, in dire need of some cash, ends up working at Taco Wiz, which is essentially DC's version of the infamous Taco Bell. While it's entirely ridiculous seeing a woman who could destroy whole planets focus intently on making burritos, the weirdest thing about the storyline is that it's actually totally endearing. Although Diana is naturally a little confused at how fast food works at first, because she's more used to killing an animal in the wilderness and eating its flesh than ordering a quick takeaway, she begins to really care about doing her job well, and goes as far as to do blindfolded training in order to make sure she can use her powers to make tacos as quickly as possible. If the idea of the daughter of Zeus and queen of the Amazons rushing to make you a Happy Meal doesn't make you smile, then you're either on a diet or living with a phobia of the delicious taco. Number 3. Wonder Woman decides she hates women. While they were arguably well-intentioned, the self-titled women's lib issues on the first volume of Wonder Woman contain storylines that seem to require a profound lack of awareness of the character herself, or otherwise took a profound joy in making Wonder Woman seem like she'd taken up getting memory loss as a hobby. The wildest of these exist in the moral blind spot known as Wonder Woman 203, where Diana is offered a modeling job from a wealthy fashion designer. However, her friends later inform her that said designer is paying all the women he hired below minimum wage, using various loopholes in the legal system to do so. Instead of agreeing with her friends and either talking about this with her new boss or quitting, Diana instead drops the biggest bombshell in comics, claiming that, in most cases, I don't even like women. It's such a wild statement to come from Wonder Woman of all people that the writer clearly realized it needed to be quickly glossed over, meaning that an astounding 2 pages later Diana is sobbing and saying that she realizes she is wrong, because she is a woman and therefore cannot hate women. It's at least a very unique reading experience, if nothing else. Number 2. Her self-imposed chains. Where most new Wonder Woman comics shy away from talking about how weird the Amazon warrior's life has been, Wonder Woman Earth 1 does the exact opposite, because it seems to be Grant Morrison's explicit aim to try and be even weirder than the kinky antics of the Golden and Silver Age Wonder Woman, with the titular hero tied up more often in the comic than the average rotisserie chicken. Though this can be explained in that it is part of many Amazon customs, it doesn't really explain the time that Diana offers Steve Trevor's a dog collar to wear as part of their foreplay, or a number of other decidedly lewd interactions. While it's all very weird, it's also very affectionate, referencing just about every weird moment of the original series as well. It's full of weird sex stories and beheadings, sure, but when you read a Wonder Woman comic, you're probably after one or the other in the first place. Number 1. Wonder Woman becomes possessed by milk. There are very, very few comics in the world that you can say are genuinely, entirely, and purposefully hog wild. The crossover comic between Shade the Changing Girl and Wonder Woman is the epitome of this type of comic, as it contains the kind of wall-to-wall lunacy that makes you almost contact high from reading it. Put simply, the plot follows a universe in which Wonder Woman has been put under mind control to believe that she's Wonder Wife, a domestic goddess who is creepily obsessed with milk. How creepily, you ask? Well, she breastfeeds a handheld vacuum and marries a milk carton, so it's not exactly an understated kind of thing. Indeed, the milk obsession is perhaps the most normal part of the whole comic, as it at least appears to have an explanation, unlike literally everything else. The crossover ends with no reveal on who the villain was that did this to Diana in the first place, no insight into what actually did happen, and no explanation of how the two characters crossed paths in the first place. And in a way, that's probably for the best, as it leaves the whole thing without any moment of sanity to counterbalance it. And that was our list. Think Wonder Woman is the queen of kink, or is her rep unfairly made? Let us know down in the comments below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. I've been Zoe from What Culture, and thanks for listening to me talk about a whole lot of weird comic stuff. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have.